Hi, I'm Angi Reno. I would like to welcome you to my page, and my prayer for you is that through listening to my story, that you will see that God truly is amazing, that if you keep your faith, no matter what storms your own personal life is going through, that God is amazing. He is here to help us all, and if we keep our faith and we will believe in Him, that there is absolutely nothing that can come along in your life that can't touch you and heal you as long as you keep your faith and stay grounded in God. And that is truly my prayer for you all as you listen to my message. Hi, I just want to start off by telling all of you thank you for coming. And I'm a big crier, so we're going to work through that part of my little world. And it just means a lot to me that you're all here. If you know me well, you know a lot of the struggles that I've gone through in the last 5 years. They've been tough, but I've overcome them, and I'm a better, stronger person. 3 years ago, I sat in a pew right over there, broken and devastated, and I didn't want to see tomorrow. I prayed, and I cried, surprise, and I asked God, I said, why? Why am I here? What's my purpose? Why have I been through the things I've been through? And what's going to happen to me tomorrow? That afternoon, well, I would go back. I truly felt God put His hands on my shoulder and told me, He said, your struggles aren't for nothing. Everything that you've been through, your childhood, your past, it's not for nothing. Share your story. And I was like, okay. Came up and talked to Brother Eddie, and I could have done cartwheels, and if you know me, I can't do those either. So I was so excited and so on fire for life. I realized then that while nothing means more to me than my family and my children, that God was truly the only person that mattered to me. And since I have fully given my life to God, I have been blessed beyond measure, and you can't even imagine. I met my husband, Angi Reno. I was 17 years old, and he just walked in, so give me a second. When I was 17, he drove through the Sonic parking lot in Brady, Texas, and I saw him, and I fell madly in love, and we never spoke. And I knew from that day that that man was my everything. And we hadn't even met. A few weeks later, we were at a party doing what high school kids do, making good choices, and I met him, and I fell in love. We ended up dating through my senior year in high school, and ended up having 3 beautiful children. He had a daughter, Kirsten, who is our oldest daughter. I consider her mine because she was 2 months old when we met. She told me not too long ago that, a lot of people talk about their parents being divorced and everything, and she said, I'm really blessed. I've never known life without 2 moms. And her struggles with her mother and things were tough, and I was always her rock. She looks up to me, and I was there when our oldest grandson was born. I was in the labor and delivery room with her. I thought that was amazing. That little girl's never called me mom because she had a mom. But she called me and she said, I really want you to be the one that's in there. And there are no words for what that did for me. And she is an amazing young lady. She got pregnant with our oldest grandson while going to college. And Wade and I told her, if you want to move home with us, you want to live with us, you want to, whatever it takes. And she said, no, I did this, I'll do it. She was 2 days of college, graduated. She's an RN. She's very successful, and I couldn't be more proud. She's not here today because she's at work. That's what she's always doing, is at work, but we've spent the last 3 days with her, and it's amazing. Our oldest daughter is Kimry. She's 22. She gave me my first biological grandchild on March the 17th. We were trying to hold out for him to be born on my grandmother's birthday on the 28th, but he had different plans, so he came out, and now he's a whopping 13 pounds, so he's doing great, and he is a blessing. Kimry and I have butted heads many times, and she's the most like me. She doesn't look like me, but she's the most like me, and so we've been through a lot. She's suffered through me growing up and figuring out what I was supposed to do, and she's a blessing beyond words. She and her boyfriend moved to Odessa, or he works out in Odessa, and that was hard for a mom. We had a brand new baby, and 2 weeks later she up and packed up and moved, but it's been a good thing. That's where God called them to be, and I feel really blessed that she's gone out there. My other daughter, Colin, she's fist pumping back there. She's always been my special child. When I was pregnant with her, I had a lot of problems with my pregnancy, and my umbilical cord was kinked, and she almost didn't make it. And when she was born, her little heart didn't want to beat, and she didn't want to make it. And most of you have given birth. When you give birth to a child, you feel the life come out of you, and she flopped, and it was probably the most devastating feeling as a mom, because she wasn't breathing when she came out. She was blue, and Wade looked at me and he said, "What do I do?" And the doctors took her and took off running, and I, the lovely stuff we get to do after we have babies, and so I had to wait, and I said, "Go with her." And one of my best friends came in the room a little bit later, and she was bawling, and you have to know I'm pretty stubborn. You probably know that about me. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "She's fine." And I said, "No, she's dead." And I just knew she was dead. And she was like, "No, she's not." And I said, "Then why are you crying?" She said, "Because she's beautiful and she's perfect, but she has all this, they had to do a whole lot of stuff to get her going." And so anyway, I got wheeled into the recovery room, and they came in, and I said, "I want to see my baby," because I didn't believe anybody. Nobody could tell me she was alive. They were all liars. And so anyway, the nurses told me the only way you're going to, you can see her today is if you can walk in there, and you just had a baby. You can't. And I got up and walked into the nursery. So she was tough. The next day, they kept her on the machines and breathing for 24 hours, and then the next day, the doctor came and told me, he said, "We're just going to see before we transfer her. We just want to see." That little fart kicked in and started breathing. Has been fine ever since. So she was a horrible little baby. She cried. She hated everybody. The only person she wanted to have anything to do with was her mama. And I've always waited on that person to come back, and the little demon child, as we used to call her when she was little, to come back. And I'm starting to see a little bit of that headstrong little girl that was there now, because she too is leaving and moving to Odessa on Wednesday. So while I've had a hard time getting used to that part of my life, sorry, letting your kids go is one of the hardest things you have to do, but it's also what God calls us to do. And so she's going, and I'm gonna cry, but I'm gonna be all right, because I have so many of you good friends that, Wade and Bubba golf, and I go golfing with them, but I'd rather go shopping or to the movies, and so y'all are gonna be my strength. And then we have Bubba. As I go through the other part of my testimony, you'll see how special he really is. I would have probably had 20 kids because I wanted a son. And I'm so sorry. That boy really took his mama's heart. When Kimmery found out she was having a boy, she cried. She bawled. She didn't want a boy. She wanted a girl. A girl. I'm like, "No, you don't." No. But she sees now that that's one special little man, and that's what that kid is to me. He's a brat. He's mean. He's rude. He doesn't treat girls the way he's supposed to, but he is. They all think that the other one's my favorite, but it's amazing how each of them means so much to me. But he is an awesome young man. He's played in a pre-qualifier for the Byron Nelson this week, which is what pro golfers do, he got paired up with 2 pro golfers, and he didn't make the cut to go to the next level, but he did. I couldn't be more proud. And now, of course, he doesn't want to go to college, and he doesn't want to do anything. He just wants to be Tiger, so we'll see. I've also learned that I'm not, it's kind of like when Colin came to me a few weeks ago and said, "I think I want to go to Odessa for the summer." I wanted to say, "But no, you're not." But I didn't. I've chosen to put God first, and I prayed, and I said, I'm going to let her make her decision, and she did. And so, same thing with him. I've come to these last few weeks to know that what he wants to do is what he's going to do, what Kimberly wants to do. She's going to go back to school in the fall, and I couldn't be more proud, and so they make me proud. It may not be the way I wanted things to go, but it's all working out just fine. So I'd struggled with where to start telling y'all about my life. If you know anything about me, the last 3 years have really been horrible as far as business and public and my name being out in the press and it not being the prettiest thing that you've ever read if you read the Brownwood Bulletin. But as I went through it this morning, when Colin thought I was crazy when she got up and I was walking through the house talking to God all morning long, and he was talking back, she just couldn't hear him. He told me to just start with where your heart really leads you. And so whenever Wade and I met, I didn't realize at the time that he was a married man. He had left his wife, and so he had his daughter, and she was 2 months old. And like I said, I fell in love with him. I knew, but when I found out about his daughter, who was 2 months old, I felt horrible because I grew up, and my mom's not here today, which I can't tell you how much that breaks my heart, but I grew up and I didn't have a dad. I had a horrible childhood, and I spoke at the ARC on domestic violence, and I was the least physically abused child that we had, but I saw the abuse, I went through the abuse and things like that, but I don't harp on that in my life because to me that's who made me who I am. That's the reason he and I are still married today. That's the reason that my children grew up in a home where they were loved and they never looked out in a crowd and their mom and dad weren't there. They knew how much they meant to us. They still know how much they mean to us even when we don't like each other. And trust me, if you have kids, you know, sometimes we just don't like each other. But they know that I love them. And I knew he loved me. And when I said, go back to your wife, and he said no. And I was a virgin. I was the girl that, that made good decisions. I grew up, my grandmother was always my go-back to person. And if you know me, my grandmother passed away in October, and she wasn't my mom, but she was what I wanted my mom to be. And she is who I want to be to my grandchildren, who I want to be to my kids. She was that lady. And she was the strongest Christian. She never had a drink of alcohol. She never made a bad decision. God kept her here for 98 years, and she got so mad at him at the end, she was like, why am I still here? And I was like, because you're too good. God, she took care of herself. She didn't drink. She didn't smoke. She didn't cuss until the end. And if you've ever watched an old person pass away, they get pretty ornery there at the end. But it was amazing. And so as Wade and I dated, the emotions of dating and the love of dating and whatnot led us to that part of our relationship that I really didn't think I would ever do until I got married, and I found myself 18 years old, a senior in high school, and pregnant. And if you do the math, Kimberly was born in 1990 and I graduated in 1987. So as a senior in high school, I didn't have very many friends because I grew up in the Metroplex, and my mother and I moved to Brady after a friend of mine had been kidnapped and buried alive by her next door neighbor. I hated living in the city. My mother, I wasn't fun loving. I didn't like to do anything. I didn't go anywhere. My mother had been married several times, and so I asked my mom, I said, let's move home. And so we moved home, and that's how I met Wade, and we dated, and I got pregnant. And I was petrified. And my mother and I we were close, but she didn't like the person I had become because I went to the parties, I drank, I stayed out, I snuck out, you name it, I did it. And my mom didn't like me, but I didn't really like her a whole lot then either. And so we went through that, and as I went to my husband and my boyfriend then and my mom, and I told them both that I was pregnant. And the first answer that conclusion we came up with was I didn't need it. And so we chose to abort the baby. And that's probably one of the biggest problems that I've had in my life. I'm 44 years old, and since I was 18 years old, I haven't liked the woman that you look at in the mirror when you see her, because I took a life. an innocent baby, which is why those little babies mean so much to me. It was, we went to the clinic, and we went in, and I don't know if any of you have ever done that, but it is probably the most horrific experience of your life. I went in, and the doctor takes me back by myself because they don't really care. And I went in, and they did the sonogram. I can still see that baby on that sonogram. I can still tell you, I don't know what sex it was, but I saw my baby. And for that split second, I wanted that baby. But I was scared. I didn't know where we were going to go. I didn't know how things were going. I didn't like the way my life was. I didn't have God in my life at that time, and so I was petrified. And so I decided, okay, well, they told me, guess what? You're further along than you think you are, which only meant to me that I did actually get pregnant whenever we first were together. And so I struggled with it, and he said, well, the only thing we can do is it's going to be a 2-day procedure. It won't be one. You're going to take this pill, and you're going to come back tomorrow. I was scared. It's not like when you find out you're having a baby and you go to the doctor, they're like, here it is, we want your money, it's going to cost you $100 more, and we'll see you tomorrow. So I was 18, I took the pill. So it started the process of me having a miscarriage. And the night was horrible. We went back the following day. I went in. They literally stick a vacuum hose inside of you and take your baby out. And it is the most horrific experience of my entire life, which was part of when Colin was born. I deserved for her to be dead. That's how I felt. And when things have happened with the kids and stuff, I've always thought this is what I deserve because I made a selfish decision. I took my baby's life. Not a person knew that story until 5 years ago. I wouldn't tell anybody. Nobody knew. It was our secret. It was mine. And then as I prayed through, because when I hear somebody who was born in 1987, I sell insurance, as most of you know, I look at them and think, you would be mine. I look at those things, I wonder, I question. But I read a book, it's called The Atonement Child. It was the best thing I've ever done because it gave me the peace that I needed. It's fine, it's forgiven. God forgave me a long time ago, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. I know that baby's healthy, happy, and where he or she is supposed to be, and so I've moved on. I have slides, and I'm supposed to tell her what to do, and I forget, so go ahead. Anyway, so Wade and I went through that, and as I went through that part of my life, I really hated myself. I found myself drinking more, arguing with my mom more. I didn't like anybody, and it ended up to where my mother and I we couldn't mesh anymore, and I drank a lot. And I was 18 years old in high school, and I was going to Sonic at lunch and getting a cup of ice and going and buying a bottle of wine and drinking in the afternoon at school. And that's how I spent the remainder of my senior year in high school was with a bottle. And it was tough. Nobody knew. I grew up, my mother drank a lot, my father was an alcoholic, and so that was fine. I mean, that wasn't a big deal. I can drink with anybody. I mean, I used to take pride in thinking that I could drink more than most people. And so that was who I was. My mother and I argued, didn't get along, and she told me, she said, you need to make a choice, it's him or me. And so I chose him. And we came home, and all my stuff was in the front yard. And so he looked at me, and he said, well, what am I going to do? I didn't even have a car. And I told him, I said, well, you have a choice. You can either take me home with you, or you can take me to my grandparents' house who lived here. And so we moved in together. Right after I graduated from high school, he and I started living together. And we walked along, and, God wasn't anywhere in there. I mean, and I had been raised. I knew what was right. But he did not. It didn't matter, no more than the man on the moon. And that's really tough for me. And when I was reading through Scripture and doing stuff, it's funny how if I would have read this back then, or if I would have given this, and my grandmother never knew I had an abortion. Never. The woman, she knows now. But, it was, if I just would have told her, I know she would have told me. And so this verse means a lot to me, because whenever I go through the things that I've gone through, I always come back to these verses that you'll see today. And he gives me comfort, and he's just done so much for me. And Wade and I, in 1989, I'd lived with him since 1987, and I finally looked at him and I said, are we going to get married? And so that's how I proposed to Wade. I wasn't going to live with him forever, and so I said, we need to get married. So I proposed to him in November of 1988, and in April of 1989, he and I got married. And, we still just seemed to live a life of turmoil. He wasn't raised the way I was. He wasn't, he didn't grow up in a Christian home, and so we did things. And when I look back, and I'm so proud of my kids because they come to church with us and they know that God's important, and we've raised them the way that he and I weren't really raised. And so, they may do things that some people will think, they're ashamed of their kids, and I'm not. I'm proud of my kids. It doesn't matter. We all make mistakes. And so we've gone through so much. And so I found myself back right after Colin was born, between Colin and Quentin. Wade and I were not in a place where we needed to be in our relationship. And my husband had a drug addiction that I didn't even know existed. And he and I it was turmoil. It was a storm. It was just so awful. And I wouldn't, I didn't understand. If he loved me, he was supposed to be with me. Well, he was with his friends and did stuff. And I found myself one day, I didn't even know where he was. And so I was like, I'm done. I'm out. I had the 2 girls. I couldn't live like that anymore. So I called my mother and I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm filing for divorce. I'm finished. And so she was like, okay, I could move in with her and my stepdad. And so we were going to do all of those things. And I don't remember the time frame then, but I got a phone call that they had found Wade and he was unconscious in a car. And so they transported him to the hospital in Brady. And when I went up there, his family and his mother was like my mom. Nobody thought we needed to get married. I mean, we didn't have family support. It was like, too bad, so sad, And his family really didn't love me. They didn't like me because I wasn't a partier. I drank, but nobody really knew, And so as we went to the hospital and he was laying there and he was pretty much unconscious and he was in the hospital in Brady, and it's just a little bit, no offense, worse than the hospital in Brownwood. So I was like, really? And so he was unconscious and he was laying there, and his brother and I were pretty good friends in high school. And so I looked at Coley and I said, he's dying. I mean, and there I was, and I said, well, what am I going to do? And so Coley said, well, I don't know. And so I talked to the doctor and I said, there's something wrong. Y'all aren't making him better. You're not fixing him. He wasn't that old, And so Coley and I agreed, and we transferred him against medical advice, and we moved him to San Angelo, and he coded in my car right when we pulled up to the emergency room doors. And ironically enough, I prayed. And I can tell you, I can remember thinking then, and I think it now, I don't remember when the last time was I'd prayed until then. And that was what it took for me to go, hey, wow, you're still up there. And so forget what all I've done wrong and come in here and fix this. And so they shocked him back to life, and he was rushed into ICU, and they kept him there, and he still didn't come around. And finally I told the doctors, I said, his family didn't even know that where he had been or what he had done. And I said, I'm pretty sure he's taken some drugs that he's not, that you don't even know are in his system. I don't know what's in there. I said, but y'all are killing him because you don't even know what you're doing. And so I had to sign a paper. His sister, if you know his sister, she's pretty headstrong. She didn't want to do it. They wanted to deny it. And I said, I'm still his wife. I want him drug tested, and I want to know what's going on. And so by the grace of God, I stood my ground, which I never would have done to that woman. I still won't argue with her today. And they drug tested him. Sure enough, the medication they were giving him was what was killing him. It wasn't. And so he had to go through this phases of letting it run through his system. And when he woke up, he asked for me. I walked in there. I didn't like him, but I still loved him. And he said, what do I have to do? And I said, you have to stop. We have to stop. We don't have, God's not in our life. We don't do anything the way we're supposed to. You go do what you want to. I do what I want to. I'm home with the kids. We work all the time. We've got to put God first in our life. And so he said, I'll do anything. I don't want to lose you. And so he went to drug rehab. He's been clean and sober for years. The years, I'm sorry, don't matter, but he came out of rehab. If you've ever had anybody in rehab, I was the person that went and visited him, and I was the person that really should have done drugs and been really crazy because my life was horrible compared to his. His mom loved him more than anything. He knew that all of his life, and here I was going, really, why are you the drug addict? I should have been. But he's a wonderful man, and he came through it. So we found a church at home in Brady, and we went to church, and life was good, and everything was going great. I had gotten a really good job. I was a dental assistant, and the money still didn't meet. So he and I have always had this ability or way where we always find a way to make enough money to pay the bills. It may not be the most glorious jobs. We mow yards, we pick up trash, I cleaned houses, I was a home health aide, I wiped bottoms for old people, and it's just what I did. It's what we did. And we rocked along, and in 99, he got sick. He was very sick. We lived in Brady. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. He started losing weight. He had flu-like symptoms. He just couldn't get better. They ran a few tests, but they kept telling me that they thought he had AIDS, but that was back before they knew what AIDS were. And so there we were, struggling again, going, and who did I get mad at first? Well, it was him. And so I told God, I said, really? I said, I've given you my life back. I don't drink like I used to. I still drank, but I didn't drink like I used to. And I said, what do you want from me? My husband's dying, and we had our 3 kids, and I found myself sitting there. I was raised by a mother who'd been married several times, and my grandparents who'd been married forever, and I promised my grandfather I would stay married to this man for the rest of my life. And I said, well, what am I going to do? I can't take care of these kids on what I make. I made $14,000 a year. That's nothing. And it was, like I said, if you don't believe in miracles, I have a bunch of them. And God told me, you go see Dr. Allen, and we did. We went the next day. He walked into Dr. Allen's office. Dr. Allen tested him. My husband had hepatitis C, which is chronic hepatitis, but it can be treated if you catch it early enough, and we were blessed till we caught it early enough. We were transferred to Baylor, sent to Baylor Hospital. He went through treatment there, which is a whole lot like chemotherapy treatments and stuff, and it was horrible. But I still was scared. I still didn't know, and I kept asking God, I'm like, how can I do this? How can I continue to take care of my family and take care of my kids, and my husband's dying, and if I don't have him, we can't pay for the car and the lights and the utilities, and I didn't want to be homeless. And I couldn't live with my mom. We just never had that ability, that relationship where we could stay together, and I didn't know what to do. And so I ultimately ended up, a friend of mine, he worked for Farm Bureau, and he said, you can talk to anybody. Have you ever thought about selling insurance? And I'm like, well, no, I don't have a college degree. What am I going to do? And he said, all you have to do is take the test, do the stuff. And so I did. I was very blessed. I took the test. We did all of that, and so we moved here. He weighed 123 pounds when we moved here, and he really didn't look like he was going to make it. And I went to work at Farm Bureau, and he got healthier and stronger, and life started coming together, and he started getting better. And we came to church here, and that was the thing before Brother Eddie was here. And we walked in, and they weren't very welcoming. It was really funny because, I was so used to growing up in church and how everything was, and I was like, really? And so he and I, we traveled through several different churches here. We went to one where people fall in the aisles and all that business, and I thought my grandfather was really not going to like me if I did that, because he's been gone since Kimmery was born, but he's the father figure and the man I always held up here. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? And so we didn't come back to church here, and we went to several, and Gina was actually our next door neighbor, and I remember she came over and she talked to Wade, because Wade was home. Wade didn't work back when we first moved here, and she was really the reason we came back. She was like, why didn't y'all come back? And we told her, and we ended up, we had several people come and welcome us here, and so this has always been home, to us, and so we were very blessed by this church, and things started falling into place, and Wade got healthy. We were sitting at Golden Corral, and Bruner Holly was across the street, and he said, you think I can sell cars? And I said, I think you can do anything you want to. If you know my husband, that man really can do anything he wants to do, and he's never met a stranger. And I said, yeah, I think so. And he walked across the street, and He went in, and Chester Ballard gave him a job, and my husband sold cars for several years and was very, very successful. So life started going great. And the first thing we stopped doing was coming and sitting over there in that section right there. And I was successful at Farm Bureau, but part of me was still missing something, I thought. I didn't feel like I was getting what I needed in here. And instead of going to the one I was supposed to, I found myself not. When you work for insurance companies like Farm Bureau, you win a lot of trips. So I was successful at my job, and so I started winning trips, and so I started going places, and I was popular, to say the least, with the gentlemen that generally were on the trips. I started drinking again. I started having fun, and it didn't bother me. I could sit somewhere where I would never want that man to sit and sit there and talk to you all day long. And I drank a lot, and I didn't care about much, and things rocked along with me, and a person that my husband worked with started talking to me. Well, that was okay. We're just talking. We're just friends. One thing led to another, and it turned into that I had a full-blown affair. I broke that man's heart. And whenever it all came to fruition, the man went to church here. He and his wife and their little girl, they went to church here. Wade and I went to church here. Found myself only wanting to come to church because then I could see him because he was sitting over there. And it's horrible. If you've ever had an affair, you know that it's awful. You know that it's not right. But at the moment and at the time, it is. And it's okay. And who cares? I honestly didn't care who I hurt, what I did, what I was doing, because for me, that was awesome. It's the best feeling in the world, I thought. The worst feeling in the world was when I broke his heart, when he found out. And I was a horrible person. Kimmery was old enough. She knew what was going on. And she and I went through a lot of turmoil. I ended up having to get her counseling because of my selfish acts and the person I was. And then I felt like at that time I was on the front page of the paper, because I can't tell you how many people knew that I didn't think I had a clue of what I had done and what I was doing. You think you're doing stuff and nobody knows because, nobody knows, because I didn't come out and say, Hillary, I'm doing this. Nobody knew what I was doing. I was smart. I knew what I was doing. It was fine. One thing led to another, and Wade found out, and that was horrible, and he left me, and I thought, fine, we'll just get a divorce. I'll just move on. It's going to be fine. I'll just, and I just knew he would leave his wife and he would marry me because, he told me he would. And so, that was really ugly. And she found out, and she hated me, and she's a wonderful woman, and, and it was tough because I didn't understand, why did everybody hate me, and now looking back, I really didn't understand, why did everybody hate me so bad? Well, I've got friends that have friends that had affairs. I have a friend that's having an affair that I talk to and try to help her because it's ugly. But it was a mistake. And I found myself wanting nothing but to win his love back. I didn't care anymore. I didn't want that anymore. And so for the first time in a long time, I truly hit my knees and prayed, and I begged God. I said, God, please, please help me. Take this away. That man decided to leave the state, not only the town, but the state, and he moved. He went to college. His wife ended up getting pregnant. They had another baby. They're happy. They don't live here anymore. They have a good life. I pray for them every single day. They're happy. He forgave me. He didn't divorce me, which I thought he would, and we worked things out. He and I have a stronger relationship now than we ever have, and that was awful. It was ugly. I still look at him and can't believe that he took me back because, I wasn't so sure that I would, and I wasn't so sure that why he would, or how he could look at me and how he could forgive me and how he could love me with his whole heart, but he does, and he did, and like I said, it's all God. Everything that's happened to us, the only time anything's ever come back was whenever I fully gave myself to God. And Colin was showing goats with one of her best friends, and Wade and I had finally just gotten things back to where life was good, and we were coming to church, and we were happy, and the kids were happy, and things were great. And I had gone to the goat show with Colin, and I got a text message, and it was from my husband. He had been contacted by a lady from his past, and he had a daughter. That daughter was born in not in January, but was born in the same year as the year that I had an abortion. It ripped my heart out. And I found out by a text message. But he was so afraid that where we had finally gotten together and how much we loved each other, that when he told me I would leave, because I'm not as sweet as he is. If you know us, you know that. And so I found myself sitting there going, really? You know, and Terry was there with me, and I called the girls, and I said, you know, I need you. And I'm telling you, having Christian friends is probably the only way to go, because when you're non-Christian friends, and I had those too, tell him to hit the highway, you know, because the only thing I still can think of is that girl is the same age as my baby, and how could he do that to me? But we weren't in a good place then, and it was awful, and we've tried to have a relationship with her. We've tried to do things the right way, and he did not know that she existed until 5 years ago, and so it was tough, and we've tried. But when they're not raised together and things like that, and it's not right, and that burden still lays in our heart, and we still try to figure out how to make it right. We haven't conquered that mountain completely. She's there, but she's not part of our life. And I just still pray about it, hope that God will work us through it. But we went through that storm, which is of our life, but we came out of it stronger, ironically enough, something that you think would rip you completely apart. And I didn't like him a whole lot. But, you know, then again, too, I thought, well, I'm not, you know, and when I wouldn't talk to him, when I wouldn't look at him, I thought, you know, he forgave me. I have to forgive him. It wasn't his fault. It happened. I was young. He was young. We were stupid. And so we worked through that, and we're stronger as a married couple today because of that storm in our life. And so we made it through there, and things were really, really going good. And you know, I didn't like living here anymore, and we left, and we moved. I quit Farm Bureau, and we moved to Salina. And I thought, well, if we left here, and things would be better, so we found ourselves living up in the city, and I worked for a gentleman that owned an all-state business and was intending to buy his business, and we lived there for 4 months, and the kids hated it. So Wade didn't like it. The kids didn't like it. I loved it because nobody knew you, and nobody knew your story. Nobody knew your past. And that's one of the worst things and the best things about living in this town is everybody knows you, and everybody's going to talk about you, and even if they do or they don't, you feel like they are. And so we went through that, and anyway, they wanted to move back, and so we came home, and I told Wade, I said, you know, if you'll just let me try, I can start my own business. And so we did. I opened an insurance company. Most of you know me, and so it was over by Sonic, and we were there, and I prayed, and I couldn't find the businesses, the companies to represent me and stuff, and starting your own insurance company is not easy. And I found a gentleman who owns Paragon, which is the company that I work for, and so he signed me a contract, and we came back to church, and we really came back to church, and we found ourselves again thinking God needed to come first, and we had forgiven each other of our sins, and we'd forgiven each other of all of the bad things, and we no longer, I cannot know where he is, and I don't think he's not doing something he's not supposed to be. He doesn't know where I am 95% of the time, but he doesn't worry about, am I not doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And so our relationship has been so much stronger and so much better. And then Colin and I went to Brazil with Brother Eddie and Jeannie, and we took a cruise that year. And so needless to say, for the first time in our lives, we had money, we were doing good, life was awesome. And Kimberly graduated from high school that year, and the following spring, we had gone to the girls were playing basketball in Midland, and we were driving back from the game, and my phone rang. And it was a Texas Ranger. And wow. And I was like, yeah. And he said, is this Angi Reno or Angela? It's my real name. And I said, yes, sir, it is. And he said, well, we've had a whole bunch of police officers storm your office. We've confiscated all of your documents. We've taken everything, and we're going to need you to come to the police station tomorrow. Well, my heart stopped. And I'm driving, and I've always sheltered my kids from horrible things, and that was really horrible. And so I'm trying to keep my composure, trying to go through and think, why in God's name would these people have come into my office, taken everything that I have, and now I've got to go to the police station tomorrow. And the first thing I thought of was, well, we're supposed to leave to go to San Antonio tomorrow. It's Quentin's birthday, And so I made it, and Wade looked at me. He knew something was wrong, and we pulled over, and I started bawling and told him what happened. And I said, but all I can do is go to the police station tomorrow, talk to him. It'll be fine, and I don't have to worry about it. And sure enough, I did. I got up early the next morning and I went to the police station, and I never had been in trouble before. And so I went in, and they interviewed me and asked me certain questions about certain things, and I answered all of their questions. And I can't even explain to you. I mean, I know most of you don't think any of you have ever been in trouble. And so I was devastated. I was like, seriously? And so we went to the office, and sure enough, everything I owned was gone except for the desk and the chair, and they took my filing cabinets. They took it all. And so he looked at me and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, we can't. I couldn't ruin my kids' lives. And I said, well, let's go ahead and go to San Antonio, and let's do this, and we'll just worry about it come Monday. And so we went, and I'm sure I was loads of fun. And we went to the Spurs game, and we did things, and we stayed in one of those big fancy hotels because we still had money. And Wade came to the room because Quentin had taken some friends, and I couldn't stop crying. It was like a Tammy song. I mean, the tears just flooded, and I had hit my knees, and I had begged God. I'm like, I'm not a bad person. What happened? And I realized at that instant, I had been blessed beyond measure financially for the first time in our lives ever, because he and I both grew up and we didn't have anything. And instead of taking it and nurturing it and doing what I'm supposed to do with my money and living life the way God wanted me to, we just did whatever in the world we wanted to, and we didn't care. And at work, I had gotten really careless. I had people that worked for me that I've known them pretty much all of my life, and things happened. Paperwork didn't get filed the way the paperwork was supposed to get filed. There were checks in a file. There were things, and I was guilty. And I realized it in that instant. God told me, he said, you did do it. I was like, well, that's great. How am I going to fix it? And so on that Monday morning, I called the district attorney's office and said, I know what happened, and amazing how I didn't know Saturday, and I really didn't, and they didn't believe me that I didn't know, and I really didn't know. And then as we went through it and we talked through it, so I called, and I was able to write a check because the money was in my bank account, and so we took care of it from a business standpoint, and I thought things were great. Well, if you've ever been in trouble, the legal system doesn't work on your time frame, it works on theirs. So I really found myself going through a whole lot of emotions, and these ladies over here kept me alive, literally. And I just went through stuff, and I couldn't understand it, and I kept praying, and I had an attorney, and I had spent all this money on stuff, and I get a phone call. I'm in Lampasas at my son's golf tournament, and the grand jury indicted me and found me guilty of theft and fraud. And I'm in Lampasas with my son at a golf tournament, and needless to say, you don't just start making a whole bunch of noise and crying when you're at things like that. And so we finished the golf tournament, and I asked the gentleman that called me on the phone that told me that I needed to go directly to jail, do not pass go, a whole lot like Monopoly, go to jail. Turn yourself in now. And I said, well, what do I do? And he said, well, don't get pulled over and come home. I said, okay. Well, one of my dearest friends is Brian Thompson, and he's a justice of the peace. And so I called Brian, and I asked Brian, and he said, well, Angie, what you need to do is don't turn yourself in here so your mugshot doesn't hit the paper, because you're going to be in the paper. And go to Goldthwaite and turn yourself in. And my best friend and my husband we together drove to Goldthwaite, and I walked in and I turned myself in, and I've never been booked, I've never been handcuffed, I've never been any of those things, and to say I was a basket case, needless to say, is an understatement. And so those officers, I think by the time it was over, wanted to take me home with them because I was so beaten and destroyed and devastated by the things that had happened, and how could I have gotten to where I was. And so come to find out later, because I was so open and honest, that I hung myself by giving them the information that they needed, because I admitted to my guilt, not even realizing that, well, I shouldn't have probably told them quite everything, but I'm pretty good at telling y'all everything. So anyway, so we went through that, and I got booked and was released on bond, and we moved on. And we had to wait on the court. And I don't take a pill, I don't take an antidepressant, I don't take anything to make me better, so what you see with me is generally what you get, which is why I cry all the time. But I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't talk to Wade, I didn't really confide in anybody. The girls knew that I was hurting, but they didn't know. You know, none of you knew. And instead of coming to who I needed to, other than Brother Eddie, I was broken, devastated. And so one afternoon, I found myself sitting on the train tracks in Bangs, Texas. And I sat there, and I took the keys out of the car, I threw them out of the window, and I prayed for that train to come. I told God, I said, I'm done. I can't do this. I'm not this strong. I'm not this person. I don't want to be here anymore. I said, God, come on, bring a train. And he said, get your keys. And I was like, I mean, really? I've already heard you once. And he said, get your keys. So I opened the door, and I walked over and picked up my keys, and I started my car. I moved that car across those tracks, and within minutes, a train came. And I didn't die. And I felt so amazed that why did he care about me? I'm not a great person. I'm a horrible person. Look at all the things I've done wrong. Why do you save me? And he told me, he said, tell your story. I didn't listen to him then no more than the man on the moon. I was like, really? Okay, I don't have a good story. My life sucks. I'm not talking to anybody, and I don't want anybody to know. Well, you know, I had hit the newspaper. Lovely people being the people that they are. You come in here, and there's still just a handful of people in this church that I've loved and lived in that will talk to me, that will look at me and care about me. Not that I've been on the front page of the newspaper. Not that I'm, had an affair, which 95% of the people know. Not that I grew up the way I grew up. Not that I've made horrible decisions, but they cared. And so we made it through that. And then come October, and that year on my birthday, I received a phone call from a friend, and she said, have you been on Facebook? And I said, no. And she said, well, you might want to go on Facebook. Well, on October 17th, I was supposed to go to trial. Well, on my birthday, a gentleman decided to go and blast me on the social media and tell everybody that they needed to buy tickets, which I didn't know that you could do this, but apparently you can make arrangements with the court here and get tickets and go to the courthouse and watch Angie get hung. And that's what he wanted. And so on October 17th, I was going to trial, and I was going to fight the charges that were against me. And I called my attorney, and I was at home alone. Wade was already gone to work. The kids were gone to school. And I told my attorney, I said, I had contacted the lady who had the website that they had blasted me on. Legally, they couldn't do that, so it was removed. But, it was already too late, because we all get on Facebook. We all know everything about everybody anyway. Wade loves it when he goes anywhere in town. Everybody's like, well, I saw so-and-so. And he's like, how'd you know? And they're always like, Facebook. And he was like, of course. And so, I sat there. And I don't take any prescribed medication, but if you know me, you know that I take a whole lot of Tylenol PM and whatnot to go to sleep. And so I thought, well, I can take enough of these pills that I don't, and it was my birthday, of all things. And I thought, I can do this, and they'll have money because I had life insurance, and they don't have to go through being embarrassed because I'm their mom, because both the kids were in school, and I'll just take these pills. And so I poured them in my hand, and I sat there, and I popped every little pill out of the packet I could find in the bathroom, and I didn't even know what all I was going to take, but I was going to take all of them, and I wasn't going to be here anymore. And as I sat there, bawling my eyes out, that voice came back, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm leaving." And he told me, no, don't do that. You have a purpose. And I sat there and I looked at those pills, and I bawled and bawled and bawled, and I said, okay. So I got up and I flushed the pills down the commode, and I found the strength to call my girls, and we got together, and I made it. And so I did call my attorney. I decided that I was not strong enough to walk up those steps to that courtroom and to face trial, and so I took a deal. So I'm on probation for being a felon, felony probation, and I've been on probation for 2 years now, and, but I did what I was supposed to do. I had started doing what the court wanted me to do, and I was doing things right, and my business, nobody works for me but me, and everything was great until just a little while ago. And I got a phone call from a police officer. It was in December. And he called me and he said, I'm going to need you to come to the police station. And I'm like, really? I haven't done anything wrong. Now, I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. Nobody's done anything. Everything's the way it's supposed to be. And he said, yeah, we've had somebody file a complaint. Well, I don't know whatever happened to people, but if you get mad at me, you can easily walk out those doors and go tell everybody what a horrible person you think I am. You really don't have to go to the police station. But if people know you and know that you have a record or know that you're on probation, automatically, if something just wasn't the way it was supposed to be, it was easier for him to go to the police station and say, I went out there and, I don't think she did my insurance the way she was supposed to. And so there I was again, and I was like, seriously? And so I went to the police station, and he had told me the gentleman's name and told me to bring the stuff in, and so I did. And I took him the files, and I gave it to him, and I said, here you go. And told him, gave him my side of the story and everything. And as most of you know, I hit the newspaper again that Saturday morning. Front page headlines. Angi Reno, she's a criminal. She violated her probation. And you can violate probation. You can leave town, and I violated my probation. If you've ever been on probation, you can sit in the wrong place in a restaurant, and I violated my probation. I can't do anything. I'm living life in jail, but I'm out here. But my life is still, I'm in jail. I just walk freely among you, but you have no idea the things that I can't do because it violates my probation. And so I was devastated, and I didn't know what to do, and so I prayed about it and walked along, and I'd gone to my probation officer. That was in December, and I believe it was in March. I go every month to probation, and I was sitting in the courthouse waiting to go into probation, and I'm always the first appointment because I don't want anybody to see me. And so I'm sitting there, and out walks a jailer. And he said, Miss Reno, we have a warrant for your arrest. And I got handcuffed, and I got led downstairs to the holding cell. And then, they asked me if I had anything, and I'm like, God, no, I'm not supposed to. I don't have anything. I'm not supposed to. And he said, do you have any money? And well, ever since that happened to us 3 years ago, we don't have any money. My car's been repossessed. I've lost 2 cars to repossession because we don't have the money to pay for it, because we went from having a $900 a month car payment to having nothing because I was careless. I didn't take care of what God gave me. I didn't do what God wanted me to do. I did what Angie wanted to do, and every now and then I came to church and gave them some money. Every now and then. Wasn't a big deal. Whatever I wanted to do, yeah, $50, here you go. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. And so I got arrested. My husband works for FedEx. He was in Abilene. My little bitty puppy, if you know me, I've got a little bitty dog. And the cop said, well, we're going to transfer you to the police station. And I said, well, can you do me a favor? And he said, what's that? And he actually goes to church with us, and I love him dearly. And he said, well, what's that? And I said, my dog's in my car, and he's going to freeze. Can you make sure that Wade gets the dog out of the car, and he can, I have a lady insured that's my bail bondsman. And I said, we can worry about me later, but get my dog out of my car. And so, anyway, I sat in the police station, and that's the first time I've ever been treated like a real criminal. And I walked in, it was a Friday, there was a basketball game that evening, and I walked into the cell that they put me in, and all these girls that had had a fun night the night before they look a whole lot rougher than me on the outside, looked at me and said, well, what are you doing in here? You don't look like you need to be in here. And I said, well, I killed my husband. And they all just kind of looked at me, and I thought, I don't know why they're in here, but I'm going to make sure that I look meaner than y'all do. And so, so I sat over in the corner on the floor in a cold cell and cried, bawled. And then all of a sudden, those girls were just kind of looking at me, and the one girl, she said, what did you really do? And I said, well, I violated my probation, and now I'm waiting, and my bond's $15,000, I think it was $15,000, and I said, I'm just waiting. And so a friend of mine was actually my jailer, and he came and he fingerprinted me, and he did the stuff, and yet again I cried and bawled and carried on and so forth and so on, and my friend and my sweet little girl that was big old pregnant came to the police station, and they bonded me out, and Wade and I found ourselves again not knowing what we were going to do. And to say I didn't have a pot to piss in, which I'm sorry, but I didn't have anything. We didn't have anything, nothing. I'm like, I didn't have the money to pay for the bail bondsman. That lady was nice enough, and I don't know if she's going to get in trouble for this, but anyway, she bonded me out without $1. She said, Angie, you're not going anywhere. You're not going to do anything. I don't care if the bond was $1 million. I'm getting you out of jail. Don't worry about it. So that was my first blessing that the man gave me. And so I went to work, and I cried, and we went through stuff. And so I went to my attorney's office, and I said, I'm in trouble. I need you. Can you help me? He wanted $6,000. I can't borrow $5,000. And so I was like, okay, and so we left, and we cried, and we went through stuff, and I thought, well, it was a holiday weekend. I can't remember what the holidays were. And I thought, well, on Tuesday, I'll go and see if I can find another attorney. And so on that following Tuesday, I went into an attorney's office here and talked to him and told him my story. And he said, I can defend you, and it's going to cost you $2,500. And I said, okay. And I said, well, when do you need it? And he said, you need it before you get that letter in the mail that tells you you're going to have to be across the street at the courthouse. And I was like, okay. Well, my mother's husband has money. My mother doesn't have money. And if you've ever been married to a person that has money, it's his money, it's not my mom. So she's given me a little every here and there to help me, to keep me from drowning, but not enough. And so I was sitting there the whole time thinking, I don't have any money. I can't get the money. My friends, they're awesome, but I'm not going to take their money. And they would do anything for me. And I bawled my eyes out. And I told God, I said, God, I need a miracle. I've heard you do this. I've heard that a person can walk to a mailbox and there's money in there. I've heard that you'll do this for people if they're worthy, if they truly are what you want them to be. You'll do this for these people. I've heard this, and I think I'm a good person. I said, but I really don't feel real good right now. I said, the only other option I've got is I'm going to jail. I'm going to miss seeing my grandson be born. I'm going to miss being in my children's lives. What am I going to do? And I bawled and bawled and bawled. There's a beautiful lady sitting in this church right now. Didn't know it. And we've only been friends because I am her insurance lady. She walked in the door of that insurance office, and I hadn't had a clue. And her mother had passed away, and her mother had left her some money, and she felt like she needed to come and see me. And miracles happened. She wrote a check, and she never thought twice about it. She saved me. She saved me from the thoughts I'd already had of suicide again. She saved me from not wanting to be here anymore. She saved me from thinking that there was absolutely no way we were going to make it. And she turned it around for me. And she had no idea. She just came by to say hi and to let me know that her mother had died because I hadn't talked to her because I didn't know. And God blessed her with money And instead of her being selfish and keeping it, she shared it with me because she felt like she needed to come and see me. She gave me a pickup, clean and free title that was her husband's, because she knew I needed it, because my kids needed it, because my kids, we couldn't do anything anymore. Wade and I couldn't help our kids. We didn't have anything. We had lost it all. I hadn't made a house payment. I couldn't pay for my car. I couldn't keep my lights on. My sister-in-law had to pay my water bill. We were so broken. And God sent this lady to save me. He saved me from myself. And He saved me from the bad choices I had made. So I'm going to close with telling you this. I have been through more hell in the 44 years of my life than any person deserves to go through. But I'm going to tell you this much. I have more faith in the man upstairs, and I'm still not perfect, and I still make mistakes. But God has forgiven me, and He's forgiven you for every single thing you've ever done that you're not supposed to. And I still haven't gone to trial, and I still am probably going to lose my license, which means I'm going to lose that business that I built 5.5 years ago. And I won't be making $1. But that man told me, sitting in that pew, tell your story. And that's why I'm here today. I finally stopped arguing with God and listened to God. And I walked into Eddie's office 3 weeks ago and I said, I talked to you about 3 years ago and I told you I wanted to share my story, but then I kind of just, decided God really didn't mean it. And I said, He's really doing a whole lot to get my attention. And if I don't do what God wants me to do, I'm really kind of scared to see what He's going to do to me next. So, while I may not have an insurance company next week, and while that used to scare me like nobody's business because I make really pretty good money out there, and it pays the light bill, and it pays the water, I don't care anymore. I don't care if I have the nicest car, and I don't care if I live in the biggest, fanciest house, and I don't care anymore. The only thing I care about is doing what God wants me to do. And God told me to share my story. And you beautiful ladies have helped me do that today. This is just the first step of what I pray will be many. I'm learning to pray more openly. I don't have one story that I won't tell. So I love all the little people that are going to walk around and talk about me because I don't really care. They can put me on the front page of the paper. They can even put my picture next time. I don't care. I'm not ashamed of who I am. I'm not ashamed of the things that my husband and I have been through. I'm not ashamed of any of my children and the choices or the mistakes that they may or may not have made. I'm a proud woman. I'm a Christian. I'm blessed beyond word. And I truly believe that God gives you angels, whether He gives them to you on this earth or He gives them to you in heaven. And so I want you to know, I don't know what your stories are. I don't know what you've been through, but I have been through the storms of hell, and God has seen me through. And I won't ever think about taking a pill, and I'm never going to think about sitting on that train track again. And so no matter what, if I end up losing my license and losing that job, it's just stuff. The only thing that matters are y'all, my children, and my God. And so I just want to close with telling you how much it means to me that you're here. Tammy's going to come up and sing a song in a second that means more to me and my daughter than you could ever imagine. And I'm going to cry because that's what I do. And I'm going to pray for you. And I want you to know that you can come up and you can pray, and I'll pray with you. Hillary will come up and she'll pray with you. You can go to the altar. And afterwards, you're all invited to talk to me. We have cookies and refreshments in the back, and I just would love to hug your necks again and tell you thank you, because it means so much to me that you're here. And I pray that this is where God wants me to go. I pray that I'm doing this the right way. And I pray that I'm able to go to people that don't know me and don't know my story, and then I can talk to them and maybe I can help them, because I've been through a lot, and I didn't even tell you everything, believe it or not. And so I'm going to close with a prayer, and then Tammy's going to come up and she's going to sing. And like I said, you're more than welcome to come up, and I'll pray with you. Hillary will come up and she'll pray with you, or afterwards. when we close, we can go back to the back and we can enjoy this afternoon. Dear God, I just want to thank you for calming my nerves and bringing these beautiful women into my life. And I'm blessed beyond measure. I may not have all the money in the world, and I may not have the fanciest things, but you've blessed me more in the 3 weeks since I talked to Brother Eddie than I could ever imagine. And I know that as long as I continue to be faithful and I do what you tell me to do, that you will continue to open the doors and you will bless me. And I pray that if one woman here is hurting, struggles with a choice that they've made that they wish that they wouldn't, that you would give them the courage to realize that they are forgiven and that we all make mistakes. And we can't change the past, but we can sure change the future. And all we have to do is believe in you, trust in you, and love you, and know that we are forgiven and we are saved by your grace. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.